is a retina specialist, and specifically why should you see Dr. Grassi? Dr. Grassi not only did 4 years of medical school, plus 1 year of medical surgical training, he then went on to do 3 years of ophthalmology training and 3 more years of training specifically in the retina. So he sees private patients, but he also has a laboratory at the University of Illinois at Chicago, which is funded by the National Institutes of Health.
The vast majority of vision loss is completely preventable. Now, vision, why even talk about vision? And fundamentally, when each of us reflects on it, vision is what gives our life meaning. If you, in fact, just poll people on what they're most afraid of, it's not death. It turns out it's not dying itself, it's the perceived disability that precedes death that concerns all of us. And when you ask people about what disability they're most afraid of, far and away it's vision. It's not cancer, it's not heart disease, it's vision, because vision sort of imbues our life with meaning. Not only does it speak to our autonomy, but also it speaks to how we envision sort of writing our lives. And when one thinks about what one wants to do with their life, it's often seeing the birth of a grandchild, attending someone's wedding, traveling to Europe. Vision is intertwined with all of that. And really, one can read papers or surveys, but that didn't sort of resonate with me or really strike home until I was an intern. And so when I was an intern, you do all of medicine as an intern. And I was at a county hospital, and a patient was having a heart attack, classic heart attack with all of the typical findings, which all of you know is life-threatening. And fortunately, it was in the hospital, and we were right on top of it. And at that time, the protocol for treating a heart attack included a medicine that he had had before that caused bleeding within his eyes, and he had had that bleeding before, and before we did anything, he said, "Don't give me that medicine." And we said, "But you're having a heart attack. This stuff is going to save your life." He said, "But I don't care. I'll sign any release that you want me to. I don't want to lose my vision." And that sort of, in the hectic buzz of putting all the leads on, sort of really brought a stillness to the room and impacted me how much vision means to people. And so the good news is, again, as I mentioned earlier, we're able to prevent most vision loss in this country and in this day and age. The challenge, though, is that up until one experiences vision loss, most of the changes that precede it, an individual is completely asymptomatic, meaning you don't notice any changes or problems until you have them. Sort of like you don't realize if your car breaks down on the side of the highway that you had a problem with your engine until you break down on the side of the highway. And so the key is with vision loss that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Far and away in medicine in general, but certainly with vision loss, and certainly with the vision loss that we deal with, which is due to problems in the retina. So if you think of your eye like a camera, the retina would be like the film in the camera. It develops the pictures that we see. Now, the retina is neural tissue. Neural tissue no different than your brain or spinal cord. And as all of you know, we're again very good at preventing loss due to neural injuries, but not so good about restoring function once that's occurred, right? So think of individuals you know who've had a stroke. We can do some to rehabilitate them, but not so often are we able to restore all of their function. Likewise, if someone injures their spinal cord and has paralysis, we can't restore that function. And so likewise, when there's significant retinal injury, oftentimes we can stabilize those issues or problems, but it's much more challenging for us to reverse that problem and much easier to prevent it in the first place. Sort of like if you were trying to stop a train, much easier to stop the train before it even got going down the tracks than trying to slow it down once it's coming down a mountainside towards you at full speed. Again, when I think about prevention, I think about, and again, this didn't really sink into me until I learned the full story of this, of polio, right? Polio is a virus that affects a neurologic tissue. So my aunt, when she was 8 years old, died of polio, and my Italian immigrant mother, in her second bedroom, as Italian immigrant grandmothers are wont to do, had a bureau sort of dedicated to her 8-year-old daughter with votive candles and the Immaculate Mother Mary and a crucifix and a picture of her 8-year-old daughter, and next to all of that was a picture of Jonas Salk. Right, and so as a little kid, I thought, whoa, Jonas Salk is some saint, right? Well, as you know, Jonas Salk didn't cure polio, right? Even today, people who are affected by polio, we have supportive care, but we don't have a treatment for it. What do we do with polio? What did Jonas Salk do with polio? Vaccination. We prevent it. And again, in medicine, in 2019, we're best at preventing these problems before they even start. And so what are those problems? The two primary ones in this country that cause irreversible vision loss are diabetic retinopathy and age-related macular degeneration. So in working age adults, diabetic retinopathy is the #1 cause of irreversible vision loss. In individuals over the age of 65, age-related macular degeneration is the #1 cause of irreversible vision loss. Both, the vast majority of the vision loss associated with both, can be prevented. And so I'll share with you one of the sadnesses of the office and of the staff is when somebody comes in too late and we look and we say, we could have prevented this. We have the tools and treatments and mechanisms to prevent this. And so that's what I want you to leave with remembering tonight. Again, is that these routine checkups are very important in terms of maintaining your vision. So let's just spend a few minutes talking about each of these different conditions. Diabetic retinopathy first. I'll explain a little bit about the condition, but I want to put it in the context of our patients so that you can relate to it. So diabetic retinopathy, of course, is caused by diabetes. You have to have diabetes to have diabetic retinopathy. Now, it turns out the biggest risk factors for developing diabetic retinopathy are one's control of the diabetes. So the higher one's sugars or hemoglobin A1C, the more at risk somebody is of developing diabetic retinopathy. But even under good control, the other major risk factor is just the duration of time, the length somebody's had diabetes. So the longer someone has diabetes, even if it's under very good control, the more at risk they are of developing diabetic retinopathy. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the changes from diabetes up until the very end stage are asymptomatic, which makes it very dangerous because you don't have any symptoms. Your vision is 20/20. Meanwhile, the retina is developing all of these changes, again, like a car driving right before it goes off a cliff, that are leading to potential irreversible vision loss. How does vision loss occur in diabetic retinopathy? Well, over the years, the diabetes starves the retina for oxygen and nutrients. Let's sort of think of it like a ship out in ocean that becomes stranded and starting to run out of food and water. And so the crew sends out an SOS signal. The retina sends out an SOS signal when it's starving for oxygen and nutrients, and the body responds. The problem is that SOS signal causes more problems than it fixes. And so that SOS signal does two things. One is it causes the regular blood vessels in the retina. The retina is like any other tissue in your body. It has blood vessels that bring in oxygen and nutrients, and blood vessels that take away carbon dioxide and waste. It causes those blood vessels to leak fluid into the retina. You can think of that like a field after a rainstorm, right? There's water and puddles and things. So long as the field reabsorbs that water, it's fine. But what happens to those areas where those puddles stay? The grass, right, starts to turn yellow and then begins to die. Likewise, when we leave fluid in the retina too long, the retinal tissue begins to not function well and ultimately die. The other thing that SOS signal does is it can cause new blood vessels to grow into the retina. Now, you'd think those new blood vessels would be a great thing, right? Because those blood vessels are bringing oxygen and nutrients. The problem is those new blood vessels can break open and bleed easily in the eye. And so that was that patient, as an intern who was having a heart attack, was afraid of. He had these new blood vessels and he didn't want them to break open and bleed into the eye. Because even just a microscopic amount of bleeding into the eye can cause vision loss. Think of putting a drop of food color dye in a glass of water, right? Even one drop changes the whole glass of water. The other thing those new blood vessels can do is contract and pull off the retina. Again, that's preventable. But in of itself, those new blood vessels, that fluid, doesn't produce any symptoms. So let me share with you a story of a woman who's now in her 70s that I followed over the last 10 years with diabetes. And so she's had long-standing diabetes, close to 30 years now. Has always been under very good control. The sort of measure we use is hemoglobin A1C, which you may have heard before. The target is 7. Hers have always been between 7 and 8, but because she's had diabetes so long, she's developed retinopathy. Initially, retinopathy was treated with laser treatment. So going back to our analogy of a ship out at sea that was running out of food and water, laser would be the equivalent of throwing some of the crew overboard, right? If you don't have as big a crew, you don't need as much oxygen, you don't need as much food and water. Now, the reason that works is because when we do laser, we keep sort of the key members of the crew, like the captain and the first mate and the engineer, everyone who's mission critical for getting the ship across the sea. And laser for diabetic retinopathy is still commonly done. Fortunately, though, over the last 10 years, we've developed a medicine that directly blocks the SOS signal, right? And so, as I shared with you, the SOS signal is what was causing all of the problems. We developed an antibody that blocks that SOS signal so the body doesn't respond, and we don't get that leakiness, and we don't develop those new blood vessels. What's the problem with blocking the SOS signal? You're still stranded, right? You're just blocked the SOS signal. And so the only downside of this treatment, while it's been a really marvelous, miraculous breakthrough, is that it doesn't cure or fix the underlying cause of the problem, which is the diabetes in the first place. And so oftentimes it requires prolonged, ongoing treatment. Small price to pay, though, for maintaining one's vision. And so in the case of my patient, she initially had laser treatment, and now intermittently has injections of this medicine into her eye. But at the end of the day, what she cares most about, what I care most about, is her vision, right? And that's vision that allowed her recently to go to Arizona for her granddaughter's college graduation. It's allowed her recently to go to Ireland with another granddaughter. And that allows her to spend time every week taking her great-grandchildren to school. This is what gives her life meaning, and this is what's possible in this day and age, just with regular, routine care. The other condition that I just wanted to mention briefly was age-related macular degeneration. Again, age-related macular degeneration affects the retina, which we said, if you think of your eye like a camera, would be like the film in the camera. The macula is the center part of in the eye. Those weeds are new blood vessels. And as we've talked about, the new blood vessels in the eye can leak fluid and blood into the retina. And going back to what we were discussing before, anytime we have fluid in the retina, over time can injure that tissue. And so, again, to block the growth of those new vessels when they're detected, we have a very effective medicine that blocks their growth once they're detected. Again, no different than if you had weeds growing in between cracks, you'd spray them. The issue with the medicine, though, is that it works best the earlier in the process that it's caught. So, for instance, if we detect these new blood vessels and a patient's vision is 20/20, we can be very confident, over 80% of the time, that we'll be able to keep their vision at around 20/20. If, however, their vision has already decreased, we can be confident we'll keep it at the level that it was when they first came in and prevent it from progressing. The natural history of AMD left untreated when you have these new blood vessels is to see about the big letter E on the eye chart. And so this medicine is a wonderful advance in terms of stabilizing someone's vision and preventing that natural history, but only if the person comes in and we're able to detect it at an early phase. And like the treatment for diabetic retinopathy, it often requires ongoing regular treatment because the underlying reason for those new blood vessels to grow in the first place isn't being addressed by the medicine. The medicine is just blocking the ingrowth of those new vessels. And so let me share the example of another patient with you. So she initially came in because she was noticing a little waviness when she looked at door frames or a light post in the vision of just one of her eyes. And she was very concerned because she was a nurse and needed her vision to do IVs and things. And so it turned out she had age-related macular degeneration in both eyes in terms of these degenerative changes, but in one of the eyes, these new blood vessels had grown in. Fortunately, her vision was quite good, and so over the last several years, she's had regular treatments with this medicine in the eye that's kept her vision essentially 20/20, allowed her to continue working, allowed her to continue riding her horse, allowed her to continue kayaking in the Pacific Northwest. Meanwhile, her other eye is at very high risk for this same problem to develop, right? She has cracks and weak areas there where new blood vessels can develop. There's a monitoring device that she has at home that we prescribed that every day she's able to check her vision. It alerts us if there's any change in her vision at baseline, so we can do what? We can bring her in immediately and start that treatment before there's any vision loss. And so the take-home of all of that is, and what I want you to remember is that vision loss is preventable. These two very common conditions, diabetic retinopathy, age-related macular degeneration, can be completely prevented, but it does require regular routine examinations. The American Academy of Ophthalmology recommends an annual, so once a year, dilated, meaning the drops they put in where your pupils are larger, ophthalmoscopic examination once a year to look for these type of problems. And so if we were able to sort of lure anyone here with wine and get just one person to go in for a checkup, it would be worth it from our standpoint. Thank you all very much for being here. Good question. So these are specially formulated eye vitamins that many of you may have seen in the drugstore. They're available over the counter. They're called AREDS vitamins, AREDS, and they've been demonstrated to be helpful only in a very specific type of patient. These are patients with age-related macular degeneration of an intermediate stage and beyond. So unless your ophthalmologist has diagnosed you with intermediate age-related macular degeneration and prescribed or suggested to take the AREDS vitamin, there's no medical or scientific evidence that they are any more beneficial than a daily multivitamin like a Centrum Silver and a well-balanced diet. And the reason I mention that in particular is because just because they're available over the counter doesn't necessarily they're safe. Some of the dosages, if you look on the back label of those vitamins, are in very high dosages. And frankly, we don't know the long-term effects of taking some of these supplements 10 or 20 years. And so they're only beneficial, and again, if you have intermediate or beyond age-related macular degeneration. Ma'am, in the
Yes,
back.
if you have dry macular degeneration, can that also be taken care of?
So 90% of the vision loss associated with age-related macular degeneration is due to what people call the wet form. The wet form would be like these new blood vessels growing, or these weeds growing in between the cracks. The dry form is when there's just the cracks and weak areas, but none of these new blood vessels. The vast majority of patients with the dry form of age-related macular degeneration do very well with that condition in terms of maintaining the vision. That's not everyone, and so there's very active research occurring both within university labs as well as the pharmaceutical industry to figure out how we might be able to delay this degenerative process. So far, we don't have a good solution to that, other than assistive devices for those people who have extensive amounts of degenerative changes without these new blood vessels. Sir?
What's the status of the computer chip implant of the macular degeneration?
So, similar to a hearing aid, a retina chip has been designed to assist patients with low vision. Currently, there's FDA approval for patients with a very severe, profound form of vision loss caused by a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. As we talked about in the case with age-related macular degeneration, in terms of your total vision, it affects no more than a dime sitting in a big soup bowl, meaning everything outside of that dime is completely normal and healthy. The issue with implanting a retina chip into the eye in that setting is that it jeopardizes all of that healthy retina outside of that center vision in terms of infection, bleeding, retinal detachment. Consequently, benefits of doing that in age-related macular degeneration with the current generation of devices, those risks don't outweigh the benefits. It may be in future generations, as we are able to work out some of the safety issues, that is more amenable. Right now, the limiting factors have been, like any electronic device, right, this implant creates heat. And heat around neural tissue has to be dissipated in a safe way without injuring the tissue, one. And then two, the sophistication of the chips is very crude, such that it's helpful if you have literally no vision, meaning aren't able to see if somebody shines a bright light in your eye. But if you have relatively functional vision from age-related macular degeneration, where you're able to get around and navigate, the risks of doing such an implant with, again, the current technology aren't worth those potential benefits.
Can you comment on a macular hole in the macula?
Yes. So this is a problem that's completely unrelated to the two issues that we discussed before. It's a mechanical problem. So if you think of your eye like a basketball, inside of it, instead of air, there's gel. And that gel is tightly attached to the inner tube of the eye. That inner tube is the retina. Over the years in all of us, it's completely normal and natural, that gel liquefies, like Jell-O left out overnight. Some of it's solid, some of it's water. As it liquefies, it begins to peel off the inner tube, like tape coming off of wrapping paper. A macular hole is where it takes a little piece of the macula, and we said the macula is the center part of the vision with it. And so the solution for that is what's called a vitrectomy, where we put a gas bubble back in to close that hole. And it turns out to be quite effective for that problem since it's mechanical in nature. Yes, sir.
I've been going to eye specialists for years, and they have told me that there's no cure for AMD. And that the only thing that I can do is take Cursor 3, the vitamin, and don't smoke. Progressively, my vision has gotten worse, especially my central vision. Now I have to use a light or a magnifying glass now to read. So is there any way that we can slow down the progression of AMD? It's dry.
This is a major challenge and a major problem right now, especially since we've been able, again, to identify a good way to handle the wet form of macular degeneration. We haven't come up with a comparably effective approach for this dry form. And as we were talking about before, the dry form is progression of those degenerative changes in the retina. And like other degenerative neurologic conditions, medically, scientifically, we're not sophisticated enough yet to know how to stop the progression of those conditions, and more importantly, reverse them once those cells and tissues have become injured or died. In the case of macular degeneration, this dry form that you mentioned, which is the degenerative changes we talked about, like cracks in a driveway or a parking lot, without the weeds, there can be ongoing progression and significant vision loss from that problem. The best ways we've been able to deal with them immediately today in 2019 have been through assist devices. In terms of the fact that I mentioned earlier, this process affects the center part of the vision, a dime sitting in the middle of the soup bowl, and so all of the assist devices aim to enlarge images or bring them out of that dime so that the rest of the retina can be used. This is a very active area of research in terms of pharmaceutical development and trying to understand the cascade of molecular factors that causes it. And unfortunately, we don't have a silver bullet to fix that problem right now.
Will you still treat somebody who doesn't have symptoms of AMD or symptoms
Well,
with the injection? Would you still treat them with the injection even if they don't have symptoms?
oh, so that's
Right.
if they, let me just make sure I'm understanding the question. An individual has age-related macular degeneration, they have new blood
No
vessels,
symptoms.
but they have the new blood vessel without any symptoms. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, and the reason would be to prevent vision loss. And so at the end of the day, what's most important is to keep people's vision good. And so we know the natural history of those new blood vessels left untreated is to cause deterioration of the vision until an individual sees about the big E on the chart. And so we know, even if they're not having symptoms, which would be the ideal case, in my opinion, if they're not having symptoms and the vision is 20/20, that if they have these new blood vessels, we could intervene and have a very good chance of keeping them that way. And that's pretty close to what happened with my patient who was the horse riding.
Your best tip?
Well, there are 3 different medications. They all work the same, they're just different brands.
Is there any success with stem cell for dry macular degeneration?
So this is an area of very active research, and the question revolves around the fact that these days, this is now trivial for us to do, is the following, which even 5, for sure 10 years ago would have sounded like something out of Star Trek to me or most people, is the following. We can take stem cells and with a defined cocktail of molecules, differentiate them, cause them to grow into all of the cells of the eye and retina, such that we can do that in a petri dish. And that's not, reportable or anything. Just routinely, we can grow a retina in a petri dish. Likewise, we can do the following. We could take some of your blood or some of your skin, and again, with a little different cocktail of molecules, cause those cells to de-differentiate, so to go back and create your own stem cells from your skin with all your own same DNA. So we don't have to use an embryo or anything to get stem cells. We can create it from every single person, their own stem cells. And then we can grow those stem cells into retinal cells. We can do that routinely. We can also, once we have that retinal tissue, and we've proven an ability to do this, we can implant that into the retina. We can get it to integrate into the retina, and we can do that safely without causing rejection or an immune response or for the cells to clump into a tumor or growth. What we haven't, and that's in human patients, what we haven't been able to do effectively yet, though, is do it in a way that improves someone's vision, right? And that's where the rubber hits the road. Can we do it and somebody see better for it? Now, we've moved the ball very far down the field, and you can see the end zone. We just haven't crossed the line yet in terms of using stem cells from that standpoint. And again, with these treatments, I'll remind you, the first commandment in medicine is do no harm, right? Don't take a bad situation and make it worse by trying to jump in and fix things. And nobody likes to fix things more than doctors, but I will tell you, nothing is worse than taking a bad situation and making it worse.
Does LASIK help?
Sorry?
Does LASIK help?
So LASIK is refractive surgery, which works on the front part of the eye, which is called the cornea. The cornea is the part of your eye you would put if you wear contact lenses, where you would put your contact lens. And what LASIK does, it just modifies the shape of the cornea to improve someone's vision so they don't have to wear glasses. So going back to our analogy of a camera, imagine you had a smudge or a thumbprint on the film in your camera. And then imagine your friend wanted to change the lens in the camera, right? You can put in different lenses all day. The thumbprint or smudge on the film part of the camera isn't going to be fixed by putting in a different lens. And so LASIK helps for refractive problems, but it doesn't fix problems in the retina for that reason. I know some excellent optometrists. With that being said, you should do what you feel most comfortable doing. The focus of an optometrist, their training and background is on dealing with refractive problems. Glasses and contact lenses is what their training background is. An ophthalmologist is a medical doctor, and their training and background is in the medical and surgical treatment of disease of the eye. And so fundamentally, you should do whatever's most comfortable. Sometimes having another opinion is also helpful, and I think one of the benefits of living in this great city, right, where there's so many options.
Mm-hmm. What are the symptoms of a detached retina?
So a retinal detachment is when literally the retina detaches from the back of the eye. Now, this is usually caused by mechanical causes, like we were talking about before, in terms of the eye being like a basketball, and there being gel inside of the basketball that liquefies. As that gel liquefies, it's peeling off the inner tube of the eye, like tape coming off of wrapping paper. Again, that in of itself is a normal, natural process, but about 10% of the time as it's peeling off, it can make a rip or tear in the retina. When there's a rip or tear in the retina, the liquid portion of the gel can now get in underneath the retina. Sort of like if you were peeling wallpaper from the wall and somebody was pouring water down the wall. As you're tugging on the wallpaper, you're creating a potential space for that water to get in underneath the wallpaper. Once it does, you can envision sort of the wallpaper folding off. So the symptoms that people have are really three primary symptoms. First, they might notice floaters. Floaters are little asteroids in your vision that float around. Floaters are clumps of the gel floating around in the liquid portion of the gel. Sort of like how an iceberg floats around in the ocean, right? In of themselves, floaters are not harmful or dangerous to the eye. They're just a sign that the gel is liquefying. The other symptom a person might experience is that as that gel's peeling off the retina, again, think of tape on wrapping paper where it's tugging on the retina. When there's tugging on the retina, you might notice a flash. A flash would be like a 4th of July sparkler in the corner of your vision. You'd see it even with your eyes closed or in a dark room. Then the final thing you would notice, if in fact you were experiencing retinal detachment, is a shade or veil. Again, think of water under wallpaper where the wallpaper is folding off. When that happens in the retina, you would notice sort of a shade or veil coming over your vision, where there'd be a dark patch. Now, it's very easy for your good eye to fill in the hole for the other eye, and so you might only notice it if you close one eye and look and make sure all the periphery is there. If there's a quadrant that's sort of grayed or blurred out, that's increasing on a sort of day-to-day basis and moving closer to the center part of the vision, that would be the other classic symptom. Focuses on diseases of the retina, primarily diabetic retinopathy, age-related macular degeneration, and then rarer forms of retinal disease. With that being said, our sort of, because of that focus on rare diseases, sometimes I'm sent patients from other retina specialists or neuro-ophthalmologists who were thought to have an optic nerve problem to make sure there's not also a retina problem. But in general, our practice is focused on medical retinal
He
disease.
has an NIH grant and he has a laboratory doing retinal research at UIC. So if you have a retinal condition, if I had a retinal condition, I would probably go to a retina specialist. He said one of the sadnesses of our practice is that we see people too late. Often they've been under the care of somebody else, and it wasn't picked up in time, or they were referred to us when already vision loss had taken place. So no matter who you see, if you have a retinal condition, it's worth a visit to a retina specialist before it gets worse. By the time you have symptoms, sometimes it is a little bit too late. So prevention, as he said, is very important. The other thing is with eye conditions, time is very important. So if you suddenly have a change in your vision, you wake up one morning and there's a spot. You wake up one morning and there's a flash. You're in a movie theater or you are walking around and you start seeing the flash he was talking about. Call immediately whoever it is that you want to see. Call them immediately. Time is very important. We will get phone calls, and these are things I say on the phone 100 times a week to people, so I'm just telling you now. We will get phone calls, oh, the flash was like 4 days ago. It's super important that you call that day and get in to see your eye care specialist. So, thank you very much. Thank you for taking time out of your evening. One thing that's very important with eye conditions, especially retinal conditions, is that you not wait. So if you have any change in vision, any sudden change in vision, please call us as soon as possible.
Hi, I'm Dr. Grassi. Do you have diabetic retinopathy or age-related macular degeneration? If so, vision loss from these conditions can largely be prevented. We'd like to help you.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. I'm the office administrator at Grassi Retina. Facing the possibility of vision loss can be a very scary thing, so we built the type of practice that we would want our own parents to go to. From the moment that you call to make your appointment, to when you walk in the door, to your time spent with the doctor, we're going to treat you like family. If you have any retinal conditions that would warrant the visit to a retina specialist, please call us at 630-995-3465 or visit our website at www.grassi, Grassi, retina.com.